Naptown Tuner here, like and subscribe. I've had the opportunity to work with Service Advisor, and I've had the opportunity to sell my own work, have more of just a counter guy. Before I left to the dealership, I would say the head tech of Big O Tire shop, but it had an automotive side to it. There was a 2-bay side for tires, and there was a 6-bay side for automotive work. And me and another guy, we were both probably the head techs. I think I was there a little bit more. I'd have made just a little bit more money, and I got my ASE certifications first. And that's kind of what got my foot in the door to go to the dealership world. In that particular job, I was able to call the customers. I was able to talk to them on the phone myself. I was able to kind of get a feel for what was going on with how to sell parts, how to sell service. It was very interesting to me to be able to have that communication. There's a big communication gap when you're just a mechanic and you have a service advisor. The service advisor is practically a big dummy. I mean, they learn over time. They consider themselves more of a salesperson. And I really don't like that gap between the mechanic and the customer. The mechanic's doing most of the work anyway. I mean, the service advisor is basically just a secretary. I wouldn't even consider the service advisor a nurse, like a doctor and nurse relationship, because a nurse does so much more. The mechanic literally has to, like in a dealership, for instance, they have to look up every single labor operation and every single little detailed part of the job. If it's warranty work, and if it's customer pay work, they still have to find labor for every single part of the repair. And then they basically have to hand it over like a silver platter to the service advisor, and then the service advisor just leans back in his office chair and says, well, we got this and this and whatever. Basically, I thought about being a service advisor before, but I need to continue getting hands-on experience. And I don't know if I'll go back to work for some shop or whatever, but I would prefer to just keep on doing YouTube. So hit that like and subscribe button so I can make some money so I can continue doing this. To continue my thought on this particular video, let's say you're replacing an alternator. Some customers are only going to want to replace the alternator. Now, every single shop, they're going to look at brakes every single time the car comes in, and they're going to try to sell them brakes. And if you're a tire shop, you're gonna start focusing on the tires on every single vehicle that comes in the shop. And we had this thing called DNA, Diagnostic Needs Analysis, and it was this little pamphlet deal where you would take a sample of all the fluids. They were big about selling just easy stuff, fluid flushes, like a machine where you'd suck the power steering fluid out and put new power steering fluid in a couple times to flush it, and flush the brake fluid. Of course, oil changes and transmission flushes, but when you're getting into actual repair work, let's say you're selling an alternator. Some people are only going to want an alternator. They're only going to want to fix what's broken. But what you should do, most people are probably going to look at the belt when they're doing the alternator. But you know what you should also do is look at the idler pulleys. Now, you could go crazy and quote everything, right? But the fact of the matter is, the idler pulley does not have to be making noise for you to quote it and for you to sell it. The tensioner pulley does not have to, this is the idler pulley, this is the tensioner pulley, this is the tensioner pulley assembly. Now, I would just quote the whole assembly. I wouldn't quote just the pulley. Not just because it's easier to replace, but you have an extra part in here. You're not going to want to replace just this pulley because this spring could break at some point. You could replace this bearing in the pulley, and then 2 months later, this spring would get floppy, and then the whole thing would just bounce around. You know, you could replace just this bad idler pulley, and then this tensioner pulley could go bad. When you replace something, it gives you the ability, the right of way, rather, to look at every single component that item is in touch with. How do I put this? Address every single component in that system. So this is ran off the belt. You're going to look at the belt, and you're going to look at everything else that belt touches, because you touched this, and now you're quote unquote responsible for all this other stuff. Not really. I mean, they're not going to hold your feet to the fire. But in my last short video, I explained how this pulley right here locked up, and the belt shredded from heat, from not being able to roll on this pulley. And then the strands of the belt got sucked behind this pulley, this harmonic balancer. The timing chain ate it. So let's say you replace an alternator, and that's all you do. The belt looks okay, and then 1 month, 2 months later, the belt that the alternator runs on gets sucked into the engine. Now, you have to go by experience as well. That's why it helps to have an experienced mechanic. You can go by what you've seen go bad and what typically goes bad, and you can quit. But that goes back to, you have to build multiple quotes. You have to build a quote for just doing the alternator. You have to build a quote for just doing the, now the belt should be part of the alternator. You're taking the belt loose and putting the belt back on, regardless if you're replacing the belt or not. There should be no additional labor to replace the belt, but there will be additional labor to replace this pulley and this pulley. Now, you shouldn't give them an option to just replace one or just replace the other. You should say, no, if we're doing above and beyond, this is a package deal. So this is the price for the alternator, this is the price for the alternator with the tensioners and the belt. Then the belt should probably come with the alternator. Everybody's gonna, you know, look at the belt and all this kind of stuff, but you should probably just quote the belt anyway, regardless, even if it looks good or not. And some people would scoff at that as well. But the fact of the matter is, you're touching it, and now you're quote unquote, not really, but you're quote unquote responsible for that belt. So now you know that you put your belt on, and you know that it's brand new, and every auto shop has to use quality parts, and every customer should key into what those parts are, where they get the parts from, what brand the parts are. And a lot of independent shops might order stuff off the internet. They might order, now shops, when people are paying for service, they're probably going to get good parts. But when you buy a car off the used car lot, you're going to get the cheapest of the cheapest of the cheap parts. They could care less if those parts last more than 3 months. They're going to wash their hands of that car, and it's going to go out into the world. They're going to try to sell you an aftermarket warranty for automotive maintenance, and if, as long as you decline that aftermarket warranty, then they just giggle, because you know, that was their like liability sign-off deal. So tell me what I'm missing in this video, and we'll make a lot more videos similar to this.